I wish good things to you who's watching this. I am Alexey, and last week I won the Mind Sports Olympiad Grand Prix Carcassonne tournament for the second time in 4 years. Today, I will be sharing with you my tournament journey, discussing the most interesting game positions, and explaining how Carcassonne players think at the expert and master level. This is part 2 of a 3-part video series. If you're interested in finding out more about the tournament format, go watch the beginning of part 1, where I discuss the tournament structure in detail and cover the games in rounds 1 through 5. We're now in round 6. I have 4 victories in 5 games. In order to qualify for the playoffs, I need a minimum of 6 victories in 7 games. So in the upcoming 2 rounds, I cannot afford any more losses. In round 6, I'm playing the Black Meeples against Tomislav Buhinicek of Croatia, a country which until last year was all but unknown in the world of competitive Carcassonne, but has now become a force to be reckoned with, largely through the efforts of the country's first, but definitely not the last, master Zvonimir Vlajic, who trained up a generation of players, including multiple experts in an incredibly short amount of time. So I am expecting definitely not an easy game here, but I do get the starting player advantage. My opponent, though, gets the first city of the game and opens the lead with 4 points on the scoreboard, and I get a monastery for 3 points. Certainly a lovely tile to have, and fortunately here my opponent makes a mistake. What they should be doing here is invading my road, but instead they start a 2-point road of their own. It might not seem like a big deal actually, but it is quite a heavy opening mistake. What's the problem? Like, I have 2-point road and they have a 2-point road, so it's the same as equalizing over here on the left, but this is actually not true. My road, first of all, has a better road quality. It's a thing that I actually haven't talked much about my channel, but basically this is the best type of road that you can have of 2 segments with 2 curves, because it is easy to finish with 2 more curves without having to use a crossroads or a horse or any other road dent tile. The next best type is this with 2 straight lines, because you still need 2 road end tiles to cover it up, but then it's hard to invade or block it. But this pattern is the clunkiest and worst, because first of all, it's quite easy to obstruct. Maybe I can start a new city over here, already putting pressure on both of these squares. And second, it still requires a couple of road ends, unless, of course, you get this big 6-point loop. So there's really no reason to settle for an inferior road to mine. What yellow should have done, of course, is just gone over here and equalized my road. But there is one more reason. I just drew this monastery tile, and monasteries are incredibly powerful in the opening. Using the words of the 2019 world champion Marian Kurkan, he who gets the first monastery gets the opening advantage. Well, why is that? Well, let's just forget about these tiles here. Like, I have a monastery plus road combo, which allows me to go over here with a curve, which, by the way, I do, and score 2 points in 1 move. I get 1 point for the road, 1 point for the monastery. Then, by the way, my opponent doesn't find a productive way to use the city tile, so they just discard it over here, obstructing my road, but also a bit obstructing their own roads too. And then I get another curve, and I again score 2 points, 1 for the road, 1 for the monastery. And this is also one of the reasons why yellow should have equalized this road going earlier on, because then I would be only gaining 1 point per move as opposed to 2 points per move, because I would only be building up my monastery without necessarily adding the road points, because the road is shared, so the length of the road doesn't matter. It's a small thing, but it will have quite some far-reaching consequences. So now yellow should invade my road, but also for different reasons. Now the road is 4 points, it's already worth invading, and a move that I definitely prefer for yellow is, wait, let me just turn this, is going over here, like that. And if they invade the road over here, well, first of all, they're sharing these 4 points, but also they're actually setting up a sneaky idea of overrunning this road with 2 meeples, with another straight line plus curve combo. So they get to go over here, but they now don't do that, which I think is a bit of a mistake, but I actually understand this move because with the previous move, they made this road a little bit more vulnerable. They chose to add one more point to themselves simply to make that road a little bit safer, maybe not to allow some big tile being drawn here, another tile being drawn here, and then this square being blocked completely. I get the second monastery, which now puts me at a big advantage. It doesn't matter that my opponent is ahead on the scoreboard. These monasteries are scoring a lot. Now, an important point to highlight here, let me actually make this a little bit bigger first. An important point to highlight is that we should not be afraid of meepling the monastery over here. Yes, this square is indeed vulnerable. Yes, I'm putting 2 meeples under threat, but it is still the opening of the game. Even if my opponents get something like a curve and goes over here and restrict this square, there's still going to be at least 3 tiles that fit into that square regardless of the restriction. So let's say if a curve goes here, then I'm going to still have 3 starting tiles available to me, and it's still a while before my opponent can build up and block that square completely. Also, if my opponent builds up and threatens the block, there are plenty defense tiles that I can draw. So in fact, in this position, black really doesn't lose his meeples often enough, and even if he does lose the meeples, my estimate would be between 5 and 10% of the time, really not more than that by any means. The upside of building monasteries close to each other is just too high. And then I have multiple squares where I can score points for 2 features at once. So whatever I place here, I get 2 points because I get 1 per each monastery. And even when I play something like this, maybe a Dorito with the road, I can get a point for a road, plus a point for a monastery, plus maybe even meeple this city in the future. So the position of black is now really, really good. And which is why yellow now suddenly, well, not suddenly, but finally attacks the road. It's a really good move from yellow. It looks far-fetched that they would be able to overrun this road ultimately, but in reality, I can't really prevent it that easily. So I guess I could draw something like a curve and go over here, and then not allow this meeple to enter this road. But even if I were to draw a curve, I actually have better uses for it. I probably much rather build up my monasteries and get meeples back sooner rather than try and prevent my opponent from taking over this road. So my plan is to basically just allow it. If I have to, there's some ways how I can reinvade the road over here, actually, through one of the multiple Doritos with the road. So there's no reason to worry for black here. I choose to dump a city cap next to my monasteries. My opponent connects the road, starts new cities, then I get a city cap to score some points. So it's a 6-point sequence. No, it's an 8-point sequence actually, because I get 4 points for the cities and 4 points for the monasteries in just 2 moves. Well, because this tile gave me 2 points and this tile gave me 2 points, plus the 4 points for the city itself, plus I'm bringing my monasteries closer to completion. So early monasteries are incredibly, incredibly powerful. Now my opponent gets a monastery of their own, and they play a rather interesting move, so they don't go over here, which is probably what I would have done. As yellow, I would have just simply foregone the idea of overtaking the road, but instead they make something interesting. So they place a monastery over here, which nets them only 3 points as opposed to a monastery over here, which would have netted them 6. So they would be taking 5 points for the monastery itself, 1 point for the road, bringing the road closer to completion, and then maybe just abandon the idea of overtaking this big road. But this move actually has a lot of merit too. It blocks the square, well, not blocks the square, but restrict the square, which is really not a big deal for either side because this square is now shared between the 2 monasteries. It also equalizes black's monastery over here. So for example, if black wants to get this meeple back, he'll need to place squares here and here, and this yellow monastery will be freeloading from this. This is an interesting idea, although if you're gonna do something like this, it was better for yellow to actually go over here to point the road end up. And the reason for that is since yellow is really going for this road idea of getting something like a curve in a straight line, he might actually prepare the road end to complete it through a Dorito tile over here. Because if you play this move, which Tomislav played here, Well, then after the takeover of the road, these meeples will be all but trapped. And if they were to turn the monastery the other way, there would actually be a good chance of them getting a crossroads here, some sort of Dorito with a road here, finishing a big road, and maybe even dropping a farmer with tempo upon completion. It's something that is much easier for them to do than for me. So I could anticipate that they are hoping for a Dorito tile in this square, and then they could drop a farmer. So, but if I do something like this and drop a farmer here, then they could draw an umbrella tile like this, go over here, and then score 2 points for this tiny road, still finish their big road, which is at the top, and then cut my field by a lot, because this upper part would not be part of the big field because of this piece of road. So that's why I can't really meeple this field safely, and I sort of have to wait until they get the Dorito tile and meeple the big field themselves. So they could actually have not an advantage here necessarily, but definitely enough to equalize my extra monastery over here. So I think a very interesting idea from the Croatian, just the tactical realization should have definitely been with the road pointing up. So I am quite happy to finish my monastery, start a new loop road. They now get a kind of clunky looking tile because they have only 2 legal moves. Well, they're not gonna go over here and obstruct their own city, so they're forced to go there. This now makes this square blockable with any city tile. And they should still, of course, try overtaking the road, because it will score at least 10 points, or 11, or 12, or 13, and it will be worth even the investment of a meeple. But the idea of them overtaking the road and getting their 2 meeples back, now that will be a little bit harder to do now. So, of course, they're not going to meeple the city, because why would they lose a meeple voluntarily? And now I have this interesting tile, and which leads us to an instructive moment. The move that jumps out to many competitive players here, and also the first thing that I thought, was just going over here and me myself meepling this road, trying to connect through one of the 3 remaining starting tiles and equalizing this road, or maybe even getting a road end and actually getting myself a majority on the road myself. But there are some reasons why I didn't do it. First of all, even though the probabilities of getting this tile are very, very good, it's like 88% or something, or even a couple percentage more, if that 12% chance occurs, then my meeple is stuck only with 1 point. They can still overrun the long road, and they have themselves a huge mini battle. So they have 2 meeples blocked for like a 10-point road or 15-point road if it grows, and I'm still trap here at 1 point. So definitely I have a good position here. I don't want to allow that sort of variance in the game. And then the second idea is that if I meeple this road over here, this leaves the city up for grabs. They could get something like a Dorito tile and build up a city really quickly. And then even if I draw a starting tile to connect here, I actually won't be able to place it here because I will not be wanting to complete their city or help their city. Or maybe I will have to place it here just to get meeples back, in which case I will be forced to concede a lot of points. So instead, I just make a normal equity move. I continue my loop road. I start a new city myself. I also pre-build a 5-point road, of which I am more likely to benefit than my opponent. And my opponent now gets the same tile as I did, and they go for the road invasion. Given that they're a bit behind after I completed one of my monasteries, it's actually something that makes a lot of sense to do. But now, this gives me an easy response of just meepling this city. And then it's actually quite difficult for them to connect the roads without helping my city. So that's why they actually don't do it yet. They just build up their own city, which makes sense. I decided to go for a bit of an unusual move here. Instead of finishing my city at the bottom, I decided to try and play a bit more efficiently. I finished my road for 4 points, took 2 points for another road, and left the city cap open. Now, normally, you really don't want to be leaving city caps open next to your own like this, because my opponent could just meeple an easy 4-point city, and then not only take easy 4 points, but also start obstructing this square. But in this position, this move is more potent than it may seem. So first of all, some of my opponent's city caps with which they could claiming these tiles, they need elsewhere. For example, if they draw the starting tile, of course, they're still going to go here. They're not going to go over here and take the 4 points. So there are more tiles that are available for me than for them. Second thing that what this move does, it exposes a threat against their city. There are only 2 right-handed daggers available, so if I get something as simple as a curve, go over here, their city will be in severe danger. This means that if they were to draw something like a normal Dorito tile without a road, then they're not likely to go over here and clean off the city cap. They're more likely to save their city first, or if they choose to clean off the city cap, then it gives me more time to actually obstruct and block their city, which is absolutely worth the 4-point sacrifice. So let's see how this game progresses. They managed to get themselves an extra support for their road, so they will now be having a 3 versus 1 majority, or maybe a 2 versus 1 if they get a crossroads here, but I am not winning this road back. But with 15 points extra on the scoreboard, I should not really be concerned about that. I get myself a meeple back, and now with this Dorito tile they decide to break my city. And it's a smart move. First of all, they can't really use a Dorito on their own city because they would be making this square even more vulnerable. And now they made it so that it is much harder for me to complete my city, given the fact that there's still only 2 tiles remaining here. They could also go over here in the future, prolong their road, and expose this square with tempo by creating a blocking platform over here on the left. And it is also an important move for them to make because they are looking forward to getting that starting tile, and they can't afford to just leave the square alone. Because imagine if I draw just one of the 7 remaining Doritos. I get to go over here like this, and then prepare to finish my city. And then imagine if they get a starting tile in this position, like what do? They probably have to go over here, but then I get another Dorito and then I just complete my city, even maybe drop a farmer for 6 points. So they need to break my city first so that they can draw that starting tile safely. This is also one of the reasons why I did not want to invade the road myself like this, because like the same situation, but with meeples reversed. Imagine if a yellow guy is over here and, well, let's use pink for black because black doesn't work with this software. And a black meeple over here, it's a situation which I definitely like much, much less if I'm black, if I'm having the advantage on the scoreboard. And I respond in kind. I try to break their city as well. Now there are only 2 tiles that fit over here, and it is quite easy to block. They build up the road, exposing this square for a potential block, and I can't do nothing much about it, so I just take 2 points in the only possible location. Of course, I'm not going to score 2 points over here because this would nicely cover up my opponent's exposed square. I'm not going to help him that way. Now they go over here and they block that square. You might argue that they're just a bit too far behind and they need to risk a little bit harder. So maybe they first need to use this tile for scoring. For example, going over here, which would also protect their own square. And then they hope to get another blocking tile a little bit later. It's definitely not a mistake, but as yellow, I would be much, much more comfortable making that move if they had 14 points on the scoreboard instead of 4. So I get a monastery. Of course, I go in the highest scoring point for 6 points. They finally get the starting tile, so this sequence turned out really well for them. So they ended up blocking here, and then they can safely connect all the roads. I will, of course, be losing all those road points, but I get to block their city in return. So we have the same number of blocked meeples, and I'm still ahead on the scoreboard. I have an extra monastery, and they will be getting this long road, but this long road will be worth 15 point max, which is not enough to compensate the scoreboard difference. They start a new city. I finish a 4-point road and a monastery, and with that, my scoreboard advantage just really becomes to be a little bit too much. They build up their monastery. Now I decide to drop a farmer here with the intention of maybe drawing another curve here and getting a much bigger farm. I'm also putting a pressure on their monastery, but they get a city cap immediately. So they score 4 points for the city and 9 points for the monastery. Now I get a crossroad tile and I decide to go here to score 4 points. You could say that this tile is not ideal because it scores 4 points, but it's not a curve, so it actually does not expand my field over here. It does not give me access to this city, but given the fact that I'm 25 points ahead on the scoreboard, this is really enough. Like, I have a 6-point field with a lot of green squares. I can quite easily draw one of the many city caps and develop the field to like 9 or 12 points. And then I don't really need a big field to withstand scoring pressure from my opponent. They now get a road monastery, which they use to finish their road, and they also drop a farmer, which makes sense because from their perspective, if they finish a road, it's going to be around 15 points, and it's not going to be enough, so they're still going to be a little bit behind. Maybe if they finish their city, though, they're going to be doing just fine. But they want to initiate some sort of a big field fight, because let's say if they get a curve, then these fields will unite. It will be a big field. Maybe they can get another farmer in. If they get a majority on the farm, they can actually still win this game. I decide to just add a couple of points to my blocked city, and here I think they're overreacting a little bit. The move which I would have played as yellow was just maybe going over here. Well, not with this tile. Let me just draw this. Simply continuing their city ruin, but they wanted to score as efficiently as possible, and so they're trying to build up their city and get maximum value from this tile. The problem is that this move allows something like this. So of course, it is absolutely worth sacrificing 4 points to block their meeple. There's still 2 tiles that fit into this square, and actually for a lot of points, they could get 2 points for the city piece and 3 points for this road, but this city is now tied to this blocked city, which means that this meeple is also blocked, and that is a big loss for them. Now, was their move a mistake? They could have just waited, gone over here, and then drawn like a normal city cap, which I believe they did draw on their next move. Okay, they didn't draw a city cap, but they drew a Dorito. But you can see how many city caps there's still in the unseen tile pool, and most of them are city plus field city caps anyway. So actually their city was super safe. They could have even gotten themselves something like a splitter and dropped a farmer for easy 9 points. So this is an attempt to be like extra efficient, but I don't think it is worth it in this case. So imagine if I didn't have this tile, they would have drawn a city cap and then completed a 10-point city. In that case, because of the shield, they would be getting 4 points for this tile. If they were simply to use the move which I would have played, which is going over here and adding this tile just to their ruin, they would be getting only 2 points for this tile. So this is an attempt to be more efficient, to score 2 extra points. But these 2 extra points are not worth the risk of getting blocked, given the fact that there were still multiple Doritos and a couple of big tiles available. For example, if I were to draw this tile, I would have done the same thing, also blocking their city. So it seems to be unnecessarily risky. And it could be because yellow thinks that they are in a worse position than they actually are. They're of course 25 points down on the scoreboard, but they also need to count the road, which they're gonna get back with multiple meeples, which is around 15, which makes them only 10 points down. And then they also should count for the city cap. And so they should be completing a 6-point city eventually. So they're like only 4 points down. With a big field, if they manage to drop strategic farmers, they can be doing just fine. But now that their meeple is blocked, and well, they, I think, make another move, which now they cannot afford. They add a point to my city, making it harder to expand. In fact, it is not hard to expand this because there's still 2 tiles that fit into this square. Now, in this position, it is just not possible to come back for yellow. So I'm not even going to show you the whole game. Now, note that I build up my monastery in a way that puts pressure on this square. So they're kind of forced to actually split their roads, because if they don't do it, I'm going to get a curve and start blocking that square anyway. So they just need to make sure to get their meeples back. As you can see, 9 points for one road, and what was it? 7 points for the other. So actually 16 points for the road. It's not too shabby. You see, they're only 7 points, or they're only 9 points down on the scoreboard, which would have been manageable, but they're down on meeples as well, and it's not something that's difficult for black to convert here. So I'm not even going to show you the remaining moves. Let me just fast forward a little bit. I finished the monastery, and in the end, I managed to win this with a 33-point difference by just exploiting my meeple advantage, finishing a bunch of cities in a way that could not have been easily obstructed. So we are on 5 out of 6. This brings us to round 7, where I am paired up against none other than Krisna, the winner of the 2024 Mind Sports Olympiad Grand Prix, which is an extremely unfortunate pairing, not only because I would have loved an easier opponent in a game in which I am not allowed to lose, but also because he's in the same situation. We're both on 5 out of 6. You need 6 victories in order to qualify for the playoffs, so one of us is busting out of this tournament. But then if you look at the bright side, this also means that if I lose this, then my teammate qualifies, so I didn't feel a lot of pressure in this game, knowing that Latvia will be at least somehow represented in the playoffs. Moreover, even if I'm to lose this one, then there's still the evening qualifier in which I can play. They are 2 qualifying tournaments, so everybody gets 2 chances. On the other hand, if I'm to qualify now, then I wouldn't have to play in the evening tournament. And having like 16 games of Carcassonne in one day at this level is way, way, way too tiring. And I just wouldn't want to go through this again. So I am, in fact, somewhat motivated to try and win this now, and then force my teammates to go and play in the evening qualifier. Well, the start isn't great, as they have the statistical advantage as the starting player. With the red meeples, they finish a 4-point city. I start a city myself. They start a road. I continue my city. So all of these are standard moves. They now start a monastery, which is a fantastic monastery because it supports their road, it controls my city, and it's already scoring 4 points. So I really don't have many good moves, and I decided to go for this, sort of the quasi-Ukrainian technique. Normally, you meeple cities like this against 2 of your opponent's monasteries, but meepling a new city against my opponent's monastery plus road can also be quite effective. So first of all, if they don't place anything over here, then I'm super happy because I have 1 meeple trapped as opposed to 2 meeple of theirs. If they do place something over there, which they do, then at least I get to threaten another city. The downside of my move here is that I have 2 cities open, which normally is a good thing in the opening, but I have 2 cities open with a very similar shape, and that's just not something that you want to have, because ideally I need 3 Doritos to finish the city most efficiently, although a city cap pattern is also available like this. But I also need Doritos for my city at the bottom, either to go for a Dorito city cap pattern or to go for the lip-shaped pattern like this. I decide to try and complete one of my cities with a city cap pattern because I know that I need the Doritos for the bottommost city, so I try to complete different cities with different tiles. Now, this allows an extra invasion square, so for example, red can go here and invade, or red can go here and invade, but because they're 2 invasion platforms, there is some scenario where maybe red invades over here, like this, and then I get to re-invade like this, then I get a triple city tile, and then I get the majority on the city, and I get away with something like 14 or 16 points even, and 2 meeples back. They, of course, immediately invade, and I don't get to re-invade. So the best that I can find is simply equalize their 4-point road. They're now starting a new city, and now finally I get the monastery, so I go for the highest scoring spot of 6 points. There was, of course, an idea of maybe going for the 3-point road instead, but 6 points is more than 3, and even though I would be saving a meeple if I were to take that 3-point road, I'm so likely to complete that monastery that it shouldn't even be viewed as an investment of a meeple. So definitely a monastery is better in that position. They get another monastery to control mine. Now, if I want to get this meeple back, I will need to fill these 2 squares, in which case I would be also helping out red with their monastery. Note that this placement from red is actually much, much better than this 5-point placement, which was higher scoring for them. In fact, this move just netted them 3 points because they took 4 points for a monastery and they gave 1 point to me, so that's net 3. But having their monastery in a position that equalizes mine is so positionally advantageous that it is absolutely worth the 2-point sacrifice. Because imagine if they go over here, then yellow, from their perspective, could draw a couple of more monasteries and then go for stacking. And then suddenly I can equalize the position and even have an advantage if I draw more monasteries than them. Moreover, if they go over here, then there's some problems, like they could lose 2 meeples if, for example, this square is blocked or restricted. Of course, they will have a long road, whereas I will have only 1 point over here, but if they concede the long-term meeple advantage, there's plenty of things that yellow could do later in this position, such as take the advantage of a boatload of unseen city caps and create a big field, perhaps. So they go for this move, which is the lowest variance move, which is also the best move. I went for this, for lack of a better move, so my plan is to try and go block that square, which would make sure that I lose only 1 meeple, but they lose 2 meeples. In that case, I could safely continue my city, get a meeple back, and then get a long-term meeple majority. They get another monastery, and now my position's really grim. 3 monasteries against 1, and they have the scoreboard lead, and I really don't have much to show for it. So I decide to unify the roads and start a new city. This was not the only possible move. I could have also gone over here, but there are a couple of reasons why I'm not a huge fan of this. Well, first of all, I really want to score. With just 1 curve, red can go over here and then block this road connection. And second, if I were to go over here, then there are a couple of tiles how my opponent could hurt me. For example, with something like an extender, they could go over here, connect my little city to their blocked city as well, and then this meeple will be blocked, these 2 meeples will be blocked, but also 1 yellow meeple will be blocked over here, and I would have fewer points on blocked meeples and no meeple advantage to show for it. So I went for this, even though this placement is actually kind of dangerous. There is quite an easy blocking combo of a curve plus a Dorito that blocks this meeple against this square, but I can't be too afraid of this. When I'm behind on the scoreboard, I just have to be efficient. They decided to complete the connection, and this gives me a chance to play for something big. I could, of course, finish the city at the bottom, but I didn't do it. Instead, I tried to take over their bigger city. I'm also putting some pressure on this monastery square, which is also nice if I can maybe block their meeple as a side effect. But of course, my main idea is to get either a Dorito plus city cap or a Dorito plus triple city and run away with an 18-pointer here, which would more than equalize their two monasteries. They get a scoring tile to prolong their monastery and get 3 extra points on the scoreboard. I get a chance to get my meeple back. This also brings some volatility in the position, as it creates a monastery spot which wasn't previously there, and they get to take advantage of that monastery spot. So my position is looking really, really bad. These are 4 monasteries in all the fantastic spots. They have the scoreboard lead, but what I do have is a lead in meeples, but this is only temporary. In fact, all their meeples are excellently placed. These 2 guys, high chance of meeple recovery. This city is going to be completed. This monastery only needs 2 tiles to get completed. This monastery is controlling my city. Like, this position is really, really bad for yellow. The only saving grace is, of course, this city, which I try to go for now. It is an interesting tile here. I have a variety of moves available to me. I could first just ignore this square and do something else. Maybe, you know what, maybe I could go over here and start a farmer. Since I do have the temporary meeple majority, if I get a stronghold on the field, then maybe this could play against their monasteries pretty well. But I decided to do something like this. I figured that I want to be finishing this city as fast as possible. There's still 5 tiles that fit into the square. 4 of these tiles finish the city instantly. I can still drop a farmer a little bit later, given the fact that I have meeples and they don't. They decide to continue their city. Although it makes the city a little bit more vulnerable, it is something that is worth doing. It's efficient scoring. I decide to go for the Ukrainian technique against their monasteries, really the best move that I could find at the moment. So I want to not allow them drawing something like a series of straight lines to complete easy monasteries. And then my later plan is to draw something like a simple curve over here, and maybe even drop a farmer and get myself a long-term meeple majority, because red would be forced to either complete or continue my city in order to get their monastery meeples back, or they would be forced to get stuck here with 2 monasteries against my 1 city, and maybe I could do something meaningful with my extra meeple. They get themselves 1 meeple back by completing a road. They also bring their monastery closer to completion. I get to invade their city at the bottom, which was important to do because they were threatening an 8-pointer here, not really something that I want seeing. Also note how this indirectly protected this monastery. Had I not played this move, they would have gone with this triple city tile over here, obstructing this monastery square and making it harder for me to retrieve my meeple. But they have a fantastic use for this tile anyway, so they score 2 points for road and make my city much, much less threatening. In fact, now in order to complete it, I would probably need to get like 3 Doritos over here to go for this pattern. I already need multiple Doritos over here to threaten the completion of my city at the bottom, so it's really, really not great. And now the tile that I get is actually not that great either. So it is a monastery, which is lovely. I, of course, get to complete my monastery and start a new one. But the issue with that is that the whole Ukrainian technique idea goes out the window. Now it is actually not really in my interest to block this square, because then I would be having 2 meeples trapped, and they would be having 2 meeples trapped, except my city only scores 3 points against the 8 points of this monastery, so it's a losing mini battle for me. I can later expand this city to something like 6 or 7 or 8, but I won't be getting the meeple majority from this situation, which was the original plan. But still, leaving this monastery empty is just not an option. It scores way, way too many points. Now I just need to change my plan. Krish is trying to block my city, which is understandable. There's still 4 tiles remaining that fit here, and I choose, well, pretty much the only reasonable defense, going over here and still leaving 2 tiles available. It was also possible to go for an indirect defense, maybe just adding this curve 1 square at the bottom, making it less likely that my opponent draws a blocking tile. But actually that would have been a mistake. So imagine if I do something like this, right? If I go here with the curve, then there's so many row tiles available in the deck that my opponent will so much more likely than not block this square before I get one of the 4 remaining triple city tiles. Let's say if I use the curve here, which would in many cases be the standard move, then red would have 6 straight lines available to go over here, leaving only 1 tile that fits into the square, only 1 remaining horse tile. If I were to turn the curve the other way, and if I were to go like this, which is also in many situations is a standard move. So very often when you're waiting for a triple city tile, indirect defenses are stronger than direct defenses. But because there are so many curves available, my opponent could draw one of the 7 curves and go like this, leaving only 1 tile available that fits into this square. So that's why I decided going for the direct defense, which is not something that I really want to be doing because it cuts the number of available tiles for me in half. There are now 2 tiles available only to fit into the square. But 2 tiles is still a lot. It equates to a 75% chance of the completion of the city. Against most players, I would have been not particularly happy to be in this position because a 75% chance of completing a city equals a 25% chance of not completing a city, which in this case probably equals losing the game because I don't really see yellow winning this position unless yellow actually gets this tile at some point. Well, maybe we can threaten these cities over here, but because they both need the same type of tiles to be completed, I'm also quite unlikely to complete both of them anyway. But a 75% chance of completing what could be a game-decisive city against one of the best players in the world is really not a bad position to be in at all. So they now go for the blocking move, which makes a lot of sense. There's now only 1 tile that fits into this square, and if they're smart enough, they could even maybe block my city a bit later, block my monastery a little bit later, and then if they draw that tile, they could free up both of their monasteries without freeing up any of my features. So it's something that I will need to take care a little bit later. I still try to preserve the threat of continuing my city, of completing my city rather. They get a scoring tile, which they use for blocking purposes, and now it's a really, really interesting move. I draw the tile that fits into the square. Look how lovely it fits into the square. But do we want to do it? Well, the answer is quite clearly no. In order for this move to make sense, I would need to be completing this city, not just prolonging it. If I were to go over here, I would be giving red 2 monastery meeples back, whilst my own monastery is easily blockable with just 1 move, by the way. Imagine if red gets something like a Dorito tile, then there's nothing that fits into the square because I just drew the last dagger of its kind. Then my city on the right is also not guaranteed to be completed. It's actually also blockable in 1 move. If red gets something like a horse tile, goes over here, scores 2 points, and then turns my city into this completely blocked square. So then I just get my city meeple back at the top, and now both of red's monasteries and my monastery and my city, everything is blocked there. I score some quick points. I am actually ahead on the scoreboard, which makes my position look good, but because of the extra monasteries and the fact that krisna just drew a hugely important tile, one of my 2 out for the city, my position is now really, really not great. And they use it to great effect. They finish their monastery meeple without really helping my city. In fact, they're making it much harder for me to complete the city. Yes, they're giving me a city point, but in order for me to complete this one, I would need to get like multiple Doritos and city caps, and it's something that's just very, very hard to do. Now, also, they have the meeple majority, and at this point, I'm probably even losing the game in many cases, even if I get my cow tile that fits over here, because with their meeple majority, they have plenty of ways to maybe recover this monastery meeple. As you can see, there's still 6 tiles that fit into this square, and then they could also be dropping a farmer for 6 points, which will become 9 points after I complete my city, and so on and so on. So not only do I need to draw the cow tile ASAP, I also need to get something else going in there in this position. I just get myself a monastery point, also add a bit of volatility into this position, given the fact that there's still 1 more crossroads remaining, and so somebody, hopefully me, even though this is a bit less likely than a red drawing the tile, would go over here and score 5 points for a road like this. They now start a new city on the right. I get a scoring tile to get a couple of points. And they now get a quadruple city tile, which they use to connect the 2 cities here. And this is not a move that's understandable for me at all. I think it's just a plain mistake from my opponent. What they should have done is just use the quadruple city tile over here, making it much, much harder, almost impossible for me to finish the city. Even though it is unlikely at the moment, there's still plenty of combos such as Dorito, Dorito, city cap, that allow me to complete the city. And currently red has only 1 meeple, so it is not easy for them to invade my city at the bottom if it comes close to completion. And now, believe it or not, this is one of the most important moves in the game. So I have a scoring tile, and I have plenty of ways to score 2 points, but one of these ways is better than the other. So why don't you try pausing the video and let me know what you would have done in this position as yellow. I'm going to reveal what I did in 3, 2, 1. So normally what you want to do with the scoring tile, you want to of course get the 2 points for road, and you want to make sure that you're not exposing any additional point scoring opportunities for your opponent. So in most positions, a move like this, getting 2 points and turning the city cap into a square where it is most obstructed, would be the way to go. But in this position, I did the opposite, leaving the city cap out in the open. And in a few moves, we're going to see why it was so important. My opponent gets a curve with which they block the scoring opportunity for this road. I just add myself a monastery point, and this is my opponent's tile where they do happen to make a mistake. This is a great tile for them to have. They have a bunch of moves available to them. I'm going to list the 3 stronger ones. So the first and most natural move is just going to the right, finishing their city, getting 4 points on the scoreboard, and getting themselves a 2-to-1 meeple advantage. There's also a more spectacular move, going over here, finishing their monastery, and maybe even dropping a farmer, anticipating the completion of my city, and then just taking the stronghold on the farm. But between these 2 moves, it is stronger to actually finish your city first and get the meeple advantage, because the monastery can still be finished with 5 more tiles. But instead, red here got a little bit greedy and took the 4 points that I left for them a move earlier. But now this exposes the idea of my move before it. I get a straight line, and now that they've completed this 4-point city, it gave me a platform to start playing against their meeple. So I of course play the straight line over here, and look at that. They have a regular city cap. Note that there are many regular city caps or city plus field tiles available, and there are not many city plus road tiles available. And in fact, the city plus row tiles, they actually now need in 2 places. So instead of having 2 meeples in hand, and an advantage on the scoreboard, they now have 0 meeples in hand because the most efficient way for them to use this tile is to actually place their last meeple, hoping to get 1 more city cap. And this gives me some chances because I now start working towards the completion of my other city. They get a straight line with which they really can't score, and they now use the straight line over here. The purpose of this move is to restrict this square, which would make it harder for me to create a blocking platform against their city. But I believe a stronger move was just going over here and trying to obstruct my city at the bottom. But this also shows us the issue with this decision before. Now that their meeple is endangered, they're focused on defending their own meeples rather than attacking mine. And note that now I have a meeple advantage, and they don't have any meeples. So I don't even bother with going for 2 points over here. I instead make this move, setting up a much higher scoring opportunity. So the idea is this: there's still 3 straight lines remaining. If my opponent draws a straight line, well, they can't do anything with it. But if I draw a straight line, I get to go over here and score 6 points for this road. If red were to have meeples in hand, these sort of shenanigans would not have been possible. I would have been probably forced to spend a meeple, wait for the straight line, and then get myself a meeple back. Also notice that this move exposes a vulnerability in this square. Now I have a chance to block this monastery completely. They get a lovely extender with which they get to continue their city, and now I use a city cap to try and really threaten the completion of my city. Look at this, like a couple moves ago, it didn't really look like much, but now there are multiple patterns such as Dorito plus horse, or maybe Dorito plus city cap that allow its completion. And with multiple Doritos and multiple city caps available, it is actually not at all that unlikely. This is the point where red should recognize the threat and start obstructing my city, which they do, but not in the best possible way. It was much better to turn their Dorito tile the other way. That way, the only realistic path of me completing the city would be getting something like a field Dorito plus a splitter tile to separate from the piece of junk. There would of course be another way. Maybe I could get a road Dorito plus a road Dorito plus a city cap, but it's a 3-tile combo rather than a 2-tile combo, so it's harder to draw. Second, it would have required me to have both road Doritos. And also, because it's a 3-tile combo, it gives my opponent more time to block that square permanently. And now finally, I have myself the cow tile, I get to complete the city, and now my position's suddenly starting to look not at all that bad. I'm suddenly 21 points ahead on the scoreboard. I'm 20 points ahead on meeples. My opponent, of course, very wisely drops a farmer. Even though it is their last meeple, this 9-point field is way too good, and they will be getting a meeple back either from this monastery or from one of these cities soon enough. The downside of their move is that there's still this 6-point road available for either player, and since they will be spending a couple of moves without meeples, I am the player who is more likely to go there. But I get a city cap, and I get to continue my city, and this also shows the mistake that red made in this move earlier on. Had the Dorito been turned the other way, this move would not have been possible, and now I still have 2 tiles that fit into this square. They get themselves a meeple back. They score 4 points. I also score 4 points. They try to block the city as they should, but immediately I get the splitter tile, which I use as a Dorito. I finish my city, I drop a farmer, and at this point there's very little what red can do, almost 40 points behind on the scoreboard. There are still some things that they can try, maybe finishing their monastery, getting this road, somehow protecting this field, but since yellow has 3 meeples here, it should not be a problem to convert this advantage. They finish their city on the left, also dropping a farmer. I do happen to get the last city cap in the entire deck, which I use over here to drop a farmer on my own. And it's also something important. And the reason why I chose to drop a 3-point farmer rather than something like a quick point move is because of this square over here. If yellow is to draw this road, they will want to go here and score 6 points. This would also expand their field, bringing in this guy into the field, totaling it to 4 completed cities, no, 5 completed cities actually, for a total of 15 points, which is a lot of points. And so now, if red wants to take this road for 6 points, they will be bringing in my farmer and they will be forced to share this 15-point farm with me. But if they don't place a tile over here, well then that's great. I've denied them an opportunity to score 6 points, and I can even draw one of these more straight lines to score the 6 points and complete the invasion myself. They now block the expansion of my rightmost field. If I were to get something like a curve, then this city could have entered my main farm, but this allows me to block their monastery. Now they get a tile to get their monastery meeple back, but it no longer fits. So instead, they create a point scoring opportunity, which I managed to take advantage with the last curve. They score the 6-point road, they let my farmer in, but they still have one more move to try and reinvade the field. And there's really not at all much that red can do. I just wanted to show you one instructive bit towards the end. I do have this move available to me. I can drop a farmer and hope for one of the 2 remaining straight lines to invade this field and even win this with a 2-to-1 majority. But with this scoreboard difference, I don't have to. Now, if there were 3 straight lines remaining in the deck, I would have done this because it would have represented a 100% chance. But this move gives me only a 66% chance, which is not good enough. So I simply go take myself a 6-point field. They now try invading the farm, but it never works because either I get the straight line myself, or if I were not to get the straight line, then the other tile, as you can see, is the horse, and then the horse is easily placeable over here. That would block this invasion square. So I get myself another 6-point field. They get a tile with which they can score. And we're going to see the points counted in a second. As you can see, yellow wins this with a 28-point difference, not something at all that I expected in the middle of the game, where red had 4 monasteries and red had the scoreboard advantage and the meeple advantage and everything, but these 2 cities ended up ensuring the comeback and then some. I want to go back to this situation over here. Remember how reds got their meeple stuck because they took 4 points for the city, because this allowed yellow to get the straight line and temporarily block the square and so on. This had far-reaching consequences, as red was stuck without meeples. First of all, with this Dorito tile, they were not able to invade yellow city, which helped yellow complete that city ultimately. And also, with this straight line, they were more concerned about defending their vulnerable meeple over here than going at the bottom and trying to break yellow city. But this was only possible because yellow left this city cap open in the first place, allowing for that blocking opportunity. So ultimately, this small detail, this city cap left outwards while scoring 2 points, ultimately allowed yellow to complete this city at the bottom in a completely different part of the board. It's interesting how in Carcassonne sometimes these small things have far-reaching consequences, and how no 2 squares on the board are completely independent and everything is connected. So I am fortunate enough to have my 6 victories in 7 rounds, and I sent my teammate to the evening qualifier, and they did play the evening qualifier for like grueling 4 more hours of Carcassonne. But now the morning qualifier is not fully over, so I do get myself the 6 wins out of 7, but so have 7 other players. You can see the full list over here. There's also a tiebreaker, and we don't need to go into the details of that. And from each qualifier, only top 4 players advance. So now there is one more pre-playoff round that needs to be played. It is a best of 3, so it works in a very straightforward way. First place plays against 8th, second against 7th, and so on. Me being in 5th, I get to play the winner of the in-person Mind Sports Olympiad events in 2024, Guilherme Neves of Portugal, with a screen name Glovir, somebody with whom I've played many times. The difference here is that it is now a best of 3 format, so I need to win 2 games in order to advance. And if I lose, again, I'm out of the qualifier, and then I would have to play in the evening qualifier again. Fortunately, I get the starting player advantage. And as you will see, my game starts with just an absolutely amazing tile run out, where I get to just score and score and score. And I will be getting quite a big enough advantage early on, as you will see. But there will be a couple of interesting moments in this game, and actually Guilherme tried to fight back really, really hard. So for example, they get the first monastery. I get, of course, the early farmer, the 10 points on the scoreboard, which turn into 14 points on the scoreboard, which is just obscene. But they, however, control this rodent, and they could score 4 points extra. Then maybe they could equalize the farm, which they do now. So their position is still playable. Still a opening advantage for black, no doubt. I get to start a new city. Note that I prolong red's road, so I sacrifice 1 point simply for the safety of the city, but also for a couple of other reasons. Now, I've got myself the opening advantage, and this field is about to be equalized. So actually, I want to keep the field as small as possible to minimize variance in this game, so I'm starting a new potential field on the right. I want to avoid big field fight here, because a big field fight is a way for my opponent to come back into the game, whereas if the position is closed, a comeback is much, much harder. This move also has some tactical advantages. It is now more difficult for them to start blocking my meeple. So let's say if they place a tile over here, then suddenly they are obstructing their own road in addition to obstructing my city here. But they get the perfect tile with which they could go over here, indirectly prolonging the road and also starting to put pressure on my city. But they don't see this move. I think it's a bit of an imprecision. I mean, this move makes sense. It scores 2 immediate points, it prolongs the road, it helps with the monastery, but I think going here had like a bit more venom, starting to really put the pressure over here, because there's still plenty of road tiles to build up their monastery a little bit later. Well, I get a meeple back soon enough, nevertheless. And I'm just going to fast forward to one of the critical positions in this game. As you can see, a huge scoreboard advantage. And now they're making a really, really smart move. So they're seeing they're like 16 points behind on the scoreboard. This stuff over here is not enough to compensate for that, so they're behind. And they're trying to introduce more variance in this game. They're saying, you're trying to make field small? No, 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 no. Not happening. We are up to a big Brazilian field fight. So their plan, of course, is to finish the city with a city cap, drop a farmer over here, maybe even drop another farmer over here, have themselves a big field for 21 points, which more than compensates for the scoreboard difference. And I would have to deal with that, but I don't really have any city tiles. I do, however, have this wonderful scoring tile for 4 points. They get a fantastic tile as well, starting a new city and almost finishing their monastery and creating a threat of finishing their city, dropping a farmer, connecting and overrunning this big field for 21 points, and not even leaving black a lot of chances for reinvade. So now I get a monastery tile, and it's actually a great tile to have, because if I continue scoring, if I get myself a couple of monasteries, then there are even some scenarios how I could win this game without the field. Maybe I can allow them to overrun the field for like 21 points. If I get 2 monasteries for 18 quickly enough, I could squeak out a win with a couple of points, even if I don't fight for the field. So with that in mind, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 legal placements of the monasteries, and neither of them is particularly unreasonable. So you go here, you control Yellow's road, you go here, you control Black City, but pause the video and try and figure out which monastery placement is best. So it's hard for me to say which monastery placement is objectively best. I can only tell you what I did. I went over here for 3 points. Now, there were multiple 4-point spots available, but why did I go over here exactly? So the main idea is that I'm putting pressure on this square and I'm controlling Yellow's road. If Yellow goes over here, finishes the city, drops a farmer, which by the way they can do with this tile, then I can get something like a cow tile and block the square, block my own monastery, but also block Glovir's monastery and Glovir's road, putting themselves at a meeple minority. Then presumably that they have to drop another farmer, that exacerbates their meeple minority and gives me just more chances to win the game in the other ways. And also, because they're worried about this stuff, I managed to induce a little imprecision from my opponent here. What they should have done is just kept the game simple. They should have simply finished their city, gone over here, and dropped a yellow farmer. And then that position is actually already quite playable for them. They're only 12 points behind on the scoreboard. They have a better developed monastery and a road, and by winning the field, which they can accomplish in a couple of tiles pretty easily, they are even putting themselves at a probably better position than I am, because this field is not that easy to access. But instead, they really want to play efficiently, and they finish their monastery and start a new city, simply intending to postpone the idea of finishing their city and drop a farmer. There's still plenty of city caps in the game, and they could get like 3 cities like this and 9-point farm on the left with multiple access squares to the main field, and this was just completely destroy black. But now I have this city cap tile with which I can't really do much to disrupt this idea. What I would have loved to have as black is something like one of the 8 remaining big tiles, particularly the quadruple city tile. Imagine if this quadruple city tile were drawn by black. It could go over here, tie these 3 cities together, possibly even block them later, then giving yellow completely no chances to win this game, because their meeples will be tied so long to the city that even if they somehow manage to complete this, black would have found some sort of path to overrun this field and not let yellow back in. But I don't have the triple city tile. I have the city cap and not many good moves. I can go over here, start a new road maybe, or start a new city, exposing this platform for a potential block. I can finish my city over here, but I didn't do any of these things. Well, pause the video and see if you can find an interesting idea for black here. So the move that I played is a move which I normally hate playing, especially when I'm in the lead on the scoreboard. Because normally I just want to score, and make the scoreboard lead such that would make it impossible for my opponent to come back with even a field. But after they finish the monastery, I'm only 11 points ahead, and if they get themselves this 8-point city, I will be only 3 points ahead, and if they drop a farmer here, well, suddenly their position is just better than mine. So I went over here, finished yellow city, and dropped a farmer. I sacrificed 4 points here, but for a good reason. This is an extremely annoying move to deal with if you are yellow. Because if yellow now finishes these 2 cities, which they will want to do eventually, suddenly I have a 9-point field here, which can access over here and overrun the big field. And the geometry of the main field is such that there are really not many good invasion squares. In fact, there's 0 high prob invasion platforms, or there's 0 platforms which are not blockable. So they could, of course, get something like a crossroads, go for a ninja farmer like this, through the outside of a curve, but it's not really something that you want to be doing in the middle game, because if they go over here, well then I can just get a crossroads myself and block that farmer and then leave their farmer stranded for 0 points. So even though I am sacrificing 4 points at the moment, I'm actually making their life really, really difficult, because in order to shape the board in such a way that would give them another field invasion platform back, they would probably need to sacrifice way more than 4 points. Moreover, look at all these city caps on the board, mostly drawn by me for scoring. There are actually not that many city caps remaining in the deck. I mean, there's enough, but it will be a while before yellow can draw them. So there are even scenarios where they don't finish one or even both of these cities, in which case this farmer is happy to stay for 3 points, and I could easily get something like a straight line next turn, trying to start and put pressure against one or both of these squares. So that was, I believe, a crucial move for me to find. And now yellow's position is a bit difficult. I simply try to score a little bit more. Also, I'm obstructing this square a little teeny bit. There are actually some scenarios how I maybe get a Dorito tile here and then to sort of block here, and then I don't even let this guy into the field. They now make a fantastic move. So they prolong their city, making it a bit harder to complete. But if they get to complete that city with a 3 Dorito pattern, then this will make sure that this guy does not have an entry in the main field. They could then later complete this city and maybe get themselves some like a horse tile, block the square, and not allow this farmer into the main field. It's still not something that I should be concerned about, because at the very least, even with these 2 cities completed, this farmer will score 9 points, and there's still plenty of chances for this black farmer to penetrate the main field. And even if he doesn't, I also have some other ideas, such as maybe drawing a curve and giving myself some more green squares on the left, and simply starting to build my own cities with city caps and develop this leftmost farm. But I don't get any city caps. I get a monastery, which is a fantastic tile to have, and I'll get to stack monasteries and score. And now red get themselves a city cap and drops a farmer, which is something that they should do. And I suddenly have only 1 meeple, and not an easy decision. So I could, of course, maybe just get my meeple back here on the right and invade the road. And just from a pure equity standpoint, that is not a bad move. But yellow is threatening at this point just to win the game on the spot. If I don't do anything about the square, it's going to draw a city cap, finish the city for 16 points, or 14 points rather, and drop a farmer, and then overrun this big field with a 3-2 majority. They will also be ahead on the scoreboard, and then I'm just losing. And with the starting tile, I could maybe go over here and invade that city and share these 14 points, but then this opens up the risk for my opponents getting another city cap, going over here, re-invading, then getting a triple city tile, finishing themselves an even bigger city, and then cutting off my farmer from the main field and winning the main field with a 2-1 majority. Not something that I want either. So instead I went for this move and left the city cap open. It still allows my opponent to complete the city with the umbrella tile or with the dagger tile or with one of the 2 starting tiles. So there's still 4 tiles that fit into the square. But it's not many. Moreover, if they do successfully complete the city, then I get to get a curve, invade this little farm, and then maybe block this square. I will be down on the scoreboard a little bit, but I will be equal on the farm, I will be ahead on the monasteries, and I will be ahead on meeple. So this should be enough to still have an advantage. The one pattern that I need to be afraid, though, is something like a Dorito with the road plus a city cap, because this would finish the city and then cut off my farmer. But if I get any of the road tiles early enough, something like this, then I would be blocking the square, leaving only 1 tile, only the 1 lone dagger that fits here. And even if they were to draw that dagger, this would make sure that my farmer enters this field. So it is a move which either blocks the city or saves my farmer, or maybe even both. They now try blocking my city, my monastery rather. I get a city tile to continue my monastery, and now I think they made a mistake. Well, it's an okay move. They're threatening. to get a city cap, finish the city for 6 points, drop a farmer over here, and then invade the secondary field from the left or the main field from the right. The reason why I think this move is a mistake is the fact that it is kind of easy to deal with. Well, most of the time it is easy to deal with. The worst that I can draw is something like a regular monastery. And then I can't do much. But if I draw any road tile, I get to go over here, building up both my own monastery and the opponent's road, and then denying them platform for invasion. Or I could draw something like this. And of course, I will be blocking their city, whilst also blocking my own monastery and their road. So I'm blocking 2 of yellow's meeples with just 1 meeple of black. I don't think its move is necessarily a mistake from yellow, because there were still some chances of me drawing either a monastery or maybe something like a vanilla city cap, in which case I probably need to just get my meeple back and pray that my opponent does not have a city cap themselves. But as yellow, I would have preferred this idea first, just with the idea of cutting off the black farmer. There is also one more reason why, from yellow's perspective, going with the Dorito with the road here was more preferable. By going over here, in addition to cutting off my farmer from the main field, they would also give themselves more chances to complete their city. If you look at the pool of unseen tiles, you can see that there's only 1 left-handed dagger, which fits into the square. But if you get a Dorito with a road like this, it suddenly changes the city cap that you need to draw in order to complete the city. Now, a right-handed dagger fits, and there's 2 of those in the deck. 1 extra tile can mean a lot when it comes to probabilities, but this is not what happened in the game. So Glovir gets to start a new city at the left. I, of course, will try and obstruct it. This is the only reasonable use of such a tile. They get to prolong their road and try to block my city, but I immediately get a tile that gives me a meeple back. Now, normally, I would want to avoid using the umbrella tile to finish my city because it also pre-finishes my opponent's road. But in this case, it's actually the best possible tile that I could have hoped for, because it makes sure that their road can grow. And since their road is already covered up on one side, then this almost blocked meeple is essentially capped at 9 points, and he cannot go over here and here and here and add road points. So now, of course, yellow is trying to build up their city. I'm trying to block yellow. They're trying to build up their city, then some, so of course I have to invade it now. They now save their city. There's still 2 tiles that fit into the square, but if they complete their city, they would also be letting this guy into the field. I decide to continue building up my monasteries because I want to get meeples back as soon as possible. They start a new city on what's going to become their field. I get to continue my monasteries, and I'm also trying to fully block this square, which they're not going to let me do. So now they also save the square, and now the starting tile fits here or here. And there's 2 starting tiles available, and they could potentially get both of them. But I get a lovely tile that finishes me a monastery. I try to play against their city, albeit unsuccessfully, but a great move now from Glovir. They can't score with this crossroads, but what they did, they covered up their road so that in the event they get a starting tile for here, they will be not only prolonging their city, but they will be also instantly getting a meeple back from the road, and they're also making it impossible for me to claim this road and then equalize this road through a starting tile myself. I decide to get myself a meeple back and simply get Glovir's meeple into the field. I'm not sure if I should have done this. I do believe it is the correct move here because I just want to get meeples back, and I know that this guy will eventually invade into the field, and it could happen at a very inconvenient moment for me. So imagine if they get the curve, they could place the curve over here, just like I did, give me a meeple back for the sake of invading the field, but they would do so late in the game that I would not have had a chance to use the meeple productively. So that's why I decided to just simply get it over with, let them invade the field, and then decide if I have to fight for the field or if I can simply outrun it. I score a little bit. I also try and block their invasion square because this meeple has not entered the field just yet. There's really not that much they can do about it. They now building up their city, also making it harder for me to connect. And I decided to not even bother going over here, even though this is a lovely tile that fits there, simply for the reason that I perceive my position to be pretty good. And if I go over here, there's some chances how they could maybe go with the last meeple and reinvade this city and then win a big city or something. This could have been unnecessarily cautious, but instead I decided to create a threat of my own, going for a quick city of 14 points if they're not careful enough. But they are careful enough. They decide to start blocking it, which is fine by me, as I'm just simply scoring with a city cap. They get a road monastery, connect to the field, and then we're just gonna blitz out a couple of moves and reach a critical position. Although I do need to comment on this one, because I decided to drop a farmer as an insurance against them drawing a starting tile. So you see what can happen now. If they get a starting tile, they actually don't have to go over here, and they don't have to continue their city. In fact, yellow is perfectly happy with this city, which is currently scoring 6 points and outscoring my 3-point farmer. So if they get a starting tile, they probably will be going over here, finishing their road and hoping to finish their 10-point city over here. So that's why I decided to drop a farmer and not allow them to get a starting tile without helping me enter the main field. They simply discard a monastery, and now I get a starting tile. But the question is, should I use it? Should I actually invade the field? And I decided that the answer is no. Well, if I do invade the field, I of course score a boatload of points. I get a monastery meeple back. I give them a road meeple back too, so I give them 4 points extra from this road segment. But I get a lot of field points, and it should look good for black. But the reason why I don't want to do this is the fact that I have 20 points extra on the scoreboard, and I don't need to conquer the field in order to win the game. So instead, I just take 7 points over here, well, 4 points for the city and 3 points for the field, and try to develop a little field on my own. They get a Dorito tile, which they simply use to score. I also get a scoring tile of my own for 3 points. And now, this is where my opponent finds an absolutely brilliant move. So their position looks pretty grim, because even though they have the control on the main field, I have enough points to withstand that. So I don't even have to fight for the field. So how do I deal with this? They have only one meeple and not many chances to score, but with their next move, they actually find the only way to give themselves a non-zero winning chance. So pause the video and try to find the winning idea here from my opponent's perspective. I'm just gonna tell you right like it is. Yellow dropped a farmer over here. And then it should be puzzling for you. Why are they attacking the field which they are already winning? They have a 2 versus 1 majority, and there's no point in throwing a third meeple. But this is a way for them to try and make the field a little bit bigger. So their plan is get a straight line, get that third meeple on the field, then maybe get another straight line, extend this field by a little bit, add this little piece here, and then they can get a starting tile to finish themselves their 14-point city, also add 3 points to the farm from that city, and also take away points from this farmer. And because drawing the starting tile would mean that they would be bringing the black farmer into the field as well, they are re-attacking the field with the third meeple in advance to anticipate that they would have a 3-2 meeple majority. So these 2 guys would be on the field, and then these 3 guys would be on the field. And it's actually a really powerful idea, and I can't really do much about it. I decided to, of course, just score a little bit, and they get themselves a crossroad tile, which they use to make it harder for me to invade the field, potentially. Now I get a straight line. I decide to go over here for a couple of reasons. I am preparing a monastery spot, which only I can use. And then I also decide that there are some scenarios, if their plan is successful, I can use this platform to invade the field if I draw the dagger, and I drop a farmer like this, and then I connect into the field with a crossroads. They, of course, eliminate that idea. And now I draw a city cap, and I actually didn't manage to solve this position properly. It is not clear necessarily what black should be doing. Either trying to set up a platform to fight for the field in case yellow draws the starting tile successfully, or just simply try and score and outrun my opponent. At this point, I decided that outrunning is the route and simply dropped a city cap in my field. I do believe it is correct. Yellow decided to cover up the invasion square, or one of the possible invasion squares against their field. For example, had they not done that, I could have gone over here with a dagger, dropped a farmer like this, and then used one of the two remaining straight lines to connect over here and neutralize this here farmer. But instead, I just use my dagger to score points for a little 6-point field at the bottom. And this actually should be enough to withstand my opponent drawing the starting tile. So I get one straight line, I meeple the road, they get another straight line, but I even happen to get the starting tile. And of course, I'm not going to put it over here or over here because I don't like the idea of burning my farmers. So I'm just going to get myself one city point. And prevail with a 15-point difference. As you can see, I was extremely fortunate with the early scoring onslaught with all the city caps, and then just managed to preserve the advantage. There was this, of course, one move, which was a tricky find, which I believe at the time was the only way to preserve the advantage. It forced my opponent into some difficult decisions, but definitely credit goes to them for being able to find this move and just generally preserving some winning chances almost up until the end of the game. Since this is the best of 3 series, I still need to play against the same opponent one more time. The score is 1-0 in my favor, and they are now the starting player, and they get 4 points. So it is a good draw for them, it may seem, but as you can see, or as you will be able to see soon enough, I get just fantastic draws in this game as well. So I will end up at an advantage soon enough. There will maybe just a couple moments which are worth addressing. I get to start the first monastery, of course. And I'm just going to blitz through a bunch of moves. Then maybe if you're interested in more details, you can leave a comment if you want to ask about a particular move. I just want to show literally just 2 tactics. They're now, of course, ahead a little bit, and black's position is not like great or anything, but it will be very, very good soon enough. Now it actually looks a bit dangerous because they found this invasion move. There's still 3 tiles that fit into the square. There's still a lot of Doritos that can allow them to complete an invasion soon enough. And then with the city, they will be scoring upwards of 18 points. So 26 points on the scoreboard is really, really a lot. So I decide to address this threat as quickly as possible. With this move, I'm creating 2 attacking or blocking platforms. So I'm playing against 2 of these squares simultaneously. They start a new city. I, of course, am now trying to crawl in into this main city unsuccessfully as they get to cover up. So I renew the threat. I keep crawling and crawling with the idea of getting this guy right there into the city. And I really need to try this because if I'm unsuccessful, then I'm going to lose really quickly. I get to pre-finish my city. They continue the road. And now change of plans. Instead of trying to invade, of course, I get a 10-point city on my own. And then what I can do now is simply allow the invasion of yellow into the city, but then block that square. And if the city is not completed, it will be worth just over 10 points, which is not great. but it's something that we can absolutely deal with. We can later outscore this 10 points with a different meeple. They start a new city, but now a change of plans again. Since I get a tile to invade the city, of course I should use this. This is now completely equal. So it is in the interest of neither party to place a tile over here, because either the city is going to be tied 1-1 or 2-2, it doesn't matter. So I've managed to dodge the biggest threat that my opponent had, and this is really the last threat that they had. They now start a new monastery, and here I decide to go very, very aggressive, meepling the monastery for 6 points. I get immediately punished for this as they score 2 points and also obstruct this square significantly, leaving only 2 tiles that fit here. So they drew about the worst possible tile for me that they could have drawn. But still, this is a move worth doing. Even in this worst case scenario, I have a 75% chance of finishing at least one of the monasteries. And it is not that easy to block this square completely, because my opponent would need to get themselves a city tile first, then they would need to dodge a couple of defensive moves. So in fact, more often than not, I actually don't lose this meeple. But even if I do, this monastery just scores too much to ignore. They now try, understandably, attacking my city, and this is actually very, very smart. They're severely reducing the number of city caps that fit into this square, and they can leave an empty city cap unmeepled because they have meeples, but I don't. Now I find a sequence which was quite difficult to find. This move over here. It looks like it really doesn't do a lot. It only leaves one more city cap in the air, but we will find out soon enough what it does. As Glovir goes over here, start a new city, now I get a Dorito with a road tile, and this would be a pause the video moment. So what do you do here and why? The first instinct is, of course, to go over here and continue my city and also give myself more city caps that fit into that square. But I really don't like doing this because it exposes a couple of extra blocking platforms. There's still plenty of curves that my opponent can draw to place them over here, or maybe even over here, and obstruct my city again. And if that happens, all I have done is just help my opponent's monastery. Moreover, if they do place a blocking tile over here, then suddenly my road meeple is also pressured. So instead, I just played this move, which completely blocks their monastery. Normally there are 5 tiles that fit into the square, but as you can see that all 5 vanilla city caps have already been drawn, so this monastery will now never be completed. And that was a crucial move to find. My opponent continues their city. Now I get a city cap to get a meeple back, and now my position is just fine. They continue the road. I even get a starting tile to get my monastery meeple back. And after that, we won't necessarily need to see all the moves. I even get the tile to block their city. It's just so fortunate for me. Again, another move, quite an easy tactical find. Let's see if we can figure it out. So my opponent is behind on the scoreboard and on meeples because their monastery meeple is blocked, whereas my monastery meeple is very much alive. They have the city over here, which already scores 9, but it is not enough. So in order to actually have a chance to win this game, they would need to complete the city. There's one and only one move that prevents that from happening, and this is this one. Again, kind of taking advantage of the unusual distribution of tiles in this game, because all 5 vanilla tiles have gone out, but so have all 3 extenders, and so have all 3 vertical splitter tiles. So normally there are 11 tiles that fit into this square. It's just all 11 of them happen to have already been spent. And then after that, I'm not going to even bother showing you the final moves. The advantage was not too difficult to convert, despite the fact that yellow blocked my monastery. I get to start a new city, and ultimately I even completed it. So despite the fact that yellow gets the temporary advantage on the scoreboard by getting a meeple back, I get immediately my own road meeple back, drop a lucrative farmer, which now scores only 6 points, but upon expansion, it will score many, many more. My opponent gets a meeple back. But when all is said and done, I in fact lose the main field as yellow manages to take it over from me with 2 meeples, but this takeover required so many resources that I just managed to score elsewhere, complete this big city, get a 9-point farmer of my own, and prevail in this game by 18 points. It's always great to have a game where tiles just go your way, not only because then you just happen to win, but also because you get to save a lot of brain power. In this game, the tiles were such that all black's decisions were pretty easy to make. Well, maybe there was one sequence which was important to get right, and this was this idea of blocking yellow's monastery. After blocking the monastery, this block was a relatively easy find, and when you get that meeple majority and equality on the scoreboard, it's typically not that difficult to convert, which is what happened in this game. So, as a result, Glovir is eliminated. They're forced to go and play the evening qualifier, and I reach the top 4 in the first qualifier, along with these 3 other players whom you can see on the screen name. Then the second qualifier happened in the evening, and these 4 players qualified after grueling 8 hours of play, and this concludes day 1 of the tournament. So we have our 8 quarterfinalists, except that we're not exactly quarterfinalists. The first part of day 2 is played in a slightly more complicated format, which is called double elimination. So this means that everybody gets up to 3 different opponents with whom you play a best of 1 encounter. If you win the first 2 games, you get into the semifinals automatically. If you win 2 out of 3, then you also get into the semifinals. If you lose 2 games, then you are instantly out. And my first opponent on day 2 is Rui Costa of Portugal with the screen name leodavinci, who is an expert currently in really good shape. In order to get to the playoffs, they defeated none other than Otto Ikonen, the former silver medalist of the Mind Sports Olympiad Grand Prix. So I certainly am not expecting an easy game here, but I came prepared. I woke up on time without an alarm clock, and I was in a good mindset. I managed to do some physical exercise, do some cold exposure, get myself the right number of calories and caffeine into my body. So I was taking this tournament really seriously, and yet the game that you're about to see was the worst game that I played in the entire tournament. From my part, of course, not from my opponent by any means. So I'm going to show you, first of all, a couple of opening moves. I really don't want to show you the entirety of the game, but I will show you most of it. My opponent starts a new city, I start a new city myself, and so on and so on. They start a new monastery, which, by the way, was the reason for me placing the city over here. It's the type of move that gives you the worst monastery square back. Still, of course, an absolutely worthy monastery to be meepling. I start a new road, which is quite annoying for yellow, because this road goes both through yellow's monastery and through yellow's city, so ultimately yellow's the one who will need to add some tiles to my road in order to finish it. They continue their city, and I now make my first mistake of the game. Now, normally I wouldn't make a move like this. I'm not sure why exactly I did that, although I remember my logic. It was kind of lame, but I might walk you through it. And generally, the first half of the game, I played with some poor time management, so I blitzed out a few moves, and then I spent more time where I should have saved my time, and then I didn't think enough where I should have thought for longer, and this was definitely one of those moments. The reason why this move is a mistake is the fact that it gives back an opportunity like this, which normally wouldn't be a problem. Like, my meeple is obstructed, but there's still 3 tiles that fit into this square. But you really don't want to be giving back easy blocks like this. The move that I should have played was simply going over here. Now, the reason why I played like this was to have at least one of the city in a safe space. And I just kind of didn't imagine that once the tile is placed over here, then my meeple on the left is going to be obstructed. So there's really no advantage between this move and the other move. Well, I guess it also makes this square a little bit more vulnerable. Yeah, it has some merits, but just doing the normal move of keeping two cities which are moderately safe was far better. And you can see the consequences of that soon enough. My opponent, of course, tries to finish a big city for themselves. They start a bunch of new cities. I decide to start breaking their city, but I don't think it's actually going to be successful. Yeah, and look at this. They now finish their city and create a blocking platform over here, and I don't get a defense tile. I, of course, get to break their meeple. They now get an easy block for themselves, and with that they have a great position. So all is not lost. Like, I still am equal on the scoreboard. I'm just down one meeple, and if I can manage to maybe block this guy, then I'm doing just all right. And I try to do that. Also, it was a move on which I spent quite a long time, because I was deciding between this move and the other orientation. So the other orientation with the crossroads pointing to the right was the one that would give me a couple of percentage points less chance to successfully block. But the downside of this move that I played is that my opponent can get something like a curve, bend it into their city, and then in addition to getting themselves their city with a road Dorito tile, they would be also scoring this 4-point road. Since I'm already meeple down, I decided that the extra percentage points on the probability of successfully blocking their meeples were more important than the risk of giving them back a ring road. But they got a defense tile anyway, and they got a different types of defense. They're now waiting not for one of the 3 Dorito tiles, but one of the 3 horses instead. I get to prolong my road, and they get to start a new city, and now I get to continue a new city. And also I need to point out that this move is actually an imprecision. They didn't need to invest in new meeple. I think a stronger move for them was to just place the city cap pointed upward. At least I remember that this was the move that I was most afraid of, and what I would have played as yellow, because it would have done the same thing. It would have exposed the threats of them connecting to my city or maybe blocking, but it would also continue their other city indirectly. And now that I've completed my city and I'm ahead on the scoreboard, then this configuration of 2 cities is not great, because if they add a tile here, then they make their square vulnerable, and if they place a tile here, well, then they make this square vulnerable. So it's certainly something that I liked seeing. They try blocking my city. Now I play the only correct move in this position, trying to go for a block and also developing my own city as well. But they quickly enough draw themselves a shielded horse tile and complete themselves a lovely city, and they're now ahead on the scoreboard and still ahead on meeples. I can score a little bit. There are some reasons for this particular choice of 2 points where I don't want to go into. Now also an important tactical move. I get to complete my city, but it's also important to drop a farmer and not occupy the city cap at the top. The reason is twofold. First of all, it's okay not to occupy the city cap at the top, because if they go and take these 4 points, then they will expose a blocking platform against their city. There's another reason. If I don't place the farm over here, they can draw a city cap, in which case they will be meepling this 9-point field. But now, if they finish their city, which of course they still want to do, I am taking this 9-point field. And this is the moment after the completion of my city where they make a mistake. They do go for the 4-pointer, and I of course immediately block their city. And then suddenly I'm not feeling bad anymore. Okay, I figured, okay, great. I got my meeple block due to a mistake, and they got their meeple block due to a mistake. It's an even position. Now we can play. It's also something important. Obviously, like, I did make mistakes later on in this game as well, but I didn't make horrible blunders, I think, later on, and managed to eke out to win. I'm going to spoil the outcome of this game for you. Now, this move, from Yellow's perspective, might look like a huge blunder, but it isn't. I would just call it a mistake, not a blunder. So it's not like they didn't see the opportunity that could be blocked. It's that they decided that they are ahead enough that they can afford the blocking of this meeple, but this is not really true. They're still in decent shape after this, because my 6-point farmer here, after the blockage of the square, will still need some time to develop it properly, but with a couple of green squares available here, it is not that difficult to do. And if they can just manage to get themselves the meeple back, then with the meeple majority that they gained earlier due to this blocked city, they can really do a lot of the field in the future, and now the position is sort of equal. But it's also understandable why they went for this move. It's not just a donation, it's not just saying, hey, block my meeple. Sometimes if they take these 4 points, I don't always have a blocking tile. And sometimes I have a city cap in hand like I did, and they just didn't want me to score 4 easy points, and they decided to score themselves. So this move does have some merit after all. They go for a scoring move, and I get a lovely city cap to get my meeples back. And from now on, I will be just blitzing out moves to show you a critical position. In this position, with 13 tiles remaining, now I have a meeple advantage as a result of successfully completing this long road without helping their city at the top too much. My opponent, however, has 10 points extra on the scoreboard as a result of scoring this 5-point road and this 3-point road and a couple of other quick points. I have managed to equalize the main field in the game, and I still have one more meeple to potentially try and go for a field takeover, but I'm still at a disadvantage as my other farmer on the right has only developed a little bit, from 6 to 9 points, by bringing in this completed city. So I try to develop my field. I simply keep the city cap empty because there are not many city caps remaining. They try to break it, and I just have a ridiculous draw of, first of all, one city cap and the other city cap. So I get back-to-back city caps while they're also trying to score efficiently. So this is a nice way how they got themselves 2 points. And they're also setting up a horse tile, which will allow them to score even more in the future, but I just get to develop my field on the right to ridiculous proportion. And this brings me to a position which is just very difficult to win for Yellow, because there are no more city caps to score there, well, after this move, which gives them 3 points, 2 for the road and 1 for the city. There are really not at all that many tiles which they can use for scoring, and I still have 2 meeples. So I can still threaten the invasion of the field on the left if I want. I can still support the field on the right if I want. And I decide to just take myself another 6-point field, which can serve 2 purposes. So if my opponent maybe just goes over here, which they could have done actually, if they just go over here, drop the last meeple, hope to invade the main field, then I would have an opportunity to get myself a straight line plus straight line combo, or maybe a road monastery plus a Dorito combo or something like this, and still reinvade. So they decide to simply meeple a monastery, and this is a lovely idea, but it basically never works. So this monastery scores a lot, and my opponent is still outscoring me, but I still have 1 meeple. And now that there are no real threats in the position, now that I don't need to worry about them potentially invading my main field, I get to do something like this. Now, the reason for this move is simply not allowing them to draw a straight line plus straight line sequence and unifying my two farms. Now these farmers score 21 points because these two cities are being scored for twice. A straight line plus straight line sequence would help them make me lose 6 points, which would actually be enough to put them over the edge. Now, they were banking on them drawing one of the two remaining big tiles, or one of the three remaining big tiles from their perspective, but even if they draw this, it just does not simply score enough, and with precise play, it is not difficult for black to put themselves over the edge. Now, I ended up bungling this endgame. I actually was in a bit of a time trouble, although it was more like in mismanagement than trouble, so I ended up scoring 2 fewer points than I otherwise could have. I just happened to draw all the big tiles and finish with a 3-point city. And I won this game with a 4-point difference despite the many mistakes that I made. If we can learn one thing from this game, is that mistakes are not the end of the world. Of course, at the start, after having my meeple blocked, which was completely avoidable, I was in a worse position until I suddenly wasn't. And after I managed to block my opponent's meeple in return, well, then it was just like a new game. It's almost resetting the score. And it's an important realization because I sometimes see, and I had it happen to me before, that like one mistake can lead to the next, can lead to tilting, can lead to spiraling into more and more worse moves. And I did make some worse moves like toward the end of the game, but it was after the fate of the game was decided. Even though this win is probably not really deserved, it doesn't matter. I just shrugged it off, make sure I learned my lesson for the next game, which I did, and headed off into the next round. And in the next round, which is also the final round, which I'm going to show you today, I'm playing against the reigning World Championship runner-up, Jozsef Tihon with a screen name szigfrid, somebody whom I perceive and who objectively is a very strong player. And this game is the highest level game out of all the games that I've played in the tournament, when I'm talking about the quality of both my moves and my opponent's move. So that's why I'm going to take a really deep dive into this one and pause a little bit, well, basically on every move. Except for the first couple where we start with a standard opening. I stick a road into my opponent's city, which prevents them from completing the city. They start a new city of their own. I pick up the other empty city cap. They, of course, continue their city like this, and now I get a city tile, which I can't use particularly productively, so I decide to pre-finish my road, whilst also continuing my opponent's city, but I open 2 connection platforms for that city, and I can invade that city a little bit later. But they manage to threaten the completion of that city. They go on the right, so I have an invasion tile, and I make a counterintuitive move here. I go not over here, which would be the normal move, but I go over here. And initially, it looks like a mistake because it allows my opponent to get something like a Dorito tile, go over here, and then maybe start working towards a big city with a 2-to-1 majority. But actually, if they were to do that, which they won't because they're smart, this would have been absolutely lovely for me. Because if they get something like a Dorito tile and put it over here, then the threat of them actually completing such a big city is not that severe because, first of all, I can reinvade through here. And then if they get, let's say, multiple Doritos, then they open even more invasion platform from the top. So if they go for this idea of trying to finish a big city with a 2-to-1 majority, then most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I have enough time to reinvade and find equality. So that's why they don't even bother. They go over here. and try to finish another city, because the shielded tile is very, very valuable and they want to save it for themselves. And also know that this move actually also threatens a bit of something. So I could get something like a row Dorito tile or another useless clunker and go over here and start putting pressure against this square. So that's why this move is a bit superior to the invasion of the left, as counterintuitive as it may seem. Now, of course, I have to invade their city at the bottom, because I can't allow them to score easy 10 points. So they just score easy 4 points, which is what they should do. And they have themselves a bit of an advantage. And now I have a Dorito tile, and a pretty interesting decision. So I could go over here and connect to the city, but then I don't like how it opens up a reconnection platform like this. So my plan about the city is actually not invasion. All I need to do is get something like a straight line, block the square, simply make sure that they don't have themselves a splitter tile or something like this, and then I can just use this side of my city as a dumping ground for big tiles, such as the quadruple city tile, some more triple cities, and then ultimately I will end up equalizing my side of the city. So a move like this is not so much an invasion as simply a prevention of my opponent completing the city. I could also go over here, equalizing the two cities, but I figured I can do this a little bit later and with a less quality tile, so I decide to make this move and develop a threat of my own. Because with a couple of more Doritos, I can quite easily get myself a 14-point city or even more. And it also eliminates some opportunities of my opponent blocking, like there's this pattern of a curve plus a Dorito facing downwards, blocking this square, and it's not something that I want to happen. My opponent tries to create a platform for blocking or obstruction, which is about the best that they can do with this straight line, but note how this also creates an 8-point monastery spot, so neither of us are afraid of the variance that such moves create. I get a curve, continue my road, and now they get a splitter. And this makes it seem that my move of not connecting over here was a mistake. Because of course they're going to finish themselves a, what is that, 14-point city or 16-point city? No, 12-point city, I can't count. And then leave me with this piece of garbage. But then, this was actually quite an unlikely occurrence. I'm so much more likely to get a straight line here before they get a splitter. And second, if I were to place a Dorito here, then they could have used the splitter here with a bit less of a negative effect, but still negative effect against me. This was one of the factors why I wasn't in a rush to connect to the city, because there was no way to prevent my opponent from drawing a splitter with a negative effect to me. So I'm 16 points behind. I decide to finish my road, and importantly, to drop a farmer. The farmer currently scores only 3 points, but somebody will be eventually placing this monastery over here, significantly expanding this field, making all of these 5 cities already part of the big field, so absolutely worthy investment of a meeple. My opponent opens a blocking platform against my city, which allows me to do this. It looks a bit counterintuitive because it gives my opponents an extra platform for blocking, but in reality, if they go over here, then I still have plenty of tiles to go over here and defend the critical square. If I were to keep the square empty, and if I allow them to place a straight line over here or some sort of restriction tile, then suddenly the upper part of my city is paralyzed. Then I have to wait for a tile over here, and only then I get to finish my city. And this would leave enough time for my opponent to maybe start blocking this square as well. So whenever your opponent is trying to block your city, it's actually quite important to try and cover up from the other side so that you have a defense square. There are some exceptions to this, of course. But this is one of those positions where such a move is sufficiently strong. Now, my opponent does not get a road tile, and I have this threat of completing the city. It's also something important to understand that creating threats is a good thing, and if my opponent doesn't do anything, well, then I can get a city cap, drop another farmer, add 8 points to my scoreboard, and suddenly my position is even better than the Reds. So they prevent that by going over here and invading the city. They absolutely have to place a meeple here, because if they don't, I could get something like an extender tile and then continue the city even further. Their plan, of course, is to fully block the square and leave me stranded with 3 points, whereas they will develop their big ruin. And there isn't really a lot that I can do about this. I could, of course, go now here and cover up, but then suddenly there's the threat of my opponent going over here, invading their own side of the city, and then using one of the 2 extender tiles to overrun the city with a majority of 2 meeples to get like 14 points or 16 points and a meeple back. So instead I just score. I score in that particular way because it benefits my field. I leave back a 4-point road, which I am more likely to benefit from than my opponent, because my opponent needs a curved tile to block this square. And then I get to use the other curved tile that I can draw to start a 4-point road like this, and also adds many more green squares to my farm. Szigfrid starts a new city, also of course threatening to get a Dorito plus a triple city or something like this. But I get the first monastery, and it's a fantastic tile for me. There's no easy way to block that monastery. I'm at 8 points. And they complete the city and drop a farmer. And they also preserve the idea of a high-impact splitter tile where they would get themselves a 10-point city, leaving me with just a 4-point city, and they would have themselves a lovely 9-point farm. Not something that I would want. I have a scoring tile. I decide to make this move, which I believe is the strongest move in this position. It does so many things. So first of all, it starts a new city in a safe place. Nice. Second, it pre-builds a road which goes through my monastery, which only I can realistically benefit, and I can finish the monastery and then meeple the new road for 5 points. So it's a threat that my opponent has to deal with. Third, it significantly restricts this square. And of course, I know that my opponent is about to do this. And so I already try and make it happen that it is harder for them to develop their blocked side of the city. Now I get the same tile again. And here I find what I believe the strongest move, where it is worth... Yeah, you know what? Pause the video and figure out what you would play here. There are plenty of options. Like there's some scoring ideas. I can get myself 2 points, 2 points like this. I can also finish the city, but it is quite a toothless move. I'm 13 points behind on the scoreboard. I'm a bunch of meeples behind. Like, I want to play something more aggressive. So I go over here without a meeple. And this move does so many things. Well, it actually does 3 things, really. So thing number 1, it pre-builds a 6-point road going through my monastery. Again, it's a road that I'm likely to benefit from. If I get a straight line, I get to score 6 points and get a monastery meeple back. If my opponent gets a straight line, sure, I lose the 6 points, but then they help me with my monastery meeple. So the expected value of that move is in my favor. Also, I covered up the invasion square. It is now harder for my opponent to invade the city. In fact, it is almost impossible. And I also set up some quick patterns how I can complete my city quickly enough. For example, a triple city plus a Dorito pattern, that's the most obvious one. And now I can benefit from every single tile in the deck. So extenders and city caps go here, whereas Doritos and triple cities go here. And it is also important to create multiple threats, because if my opponent deals with the road threat, it is more likely that I have time to finish the city, and if my opponent deals with the city threat, it is more likely that I have time to benefit from the road. They, of course, go over here, significantly restricting the number of tiles that fit here, but with 2 tiles, I still have a 75% chance of drawing a 6-pointer plus a meeple back, so it benefits me quite a lot. But still, it is the only correct move from red in this position, just to reduce the chance of me completing the monastery. And you know what? 25% of the time, this meeple does get stuck here indeed. I get to continue my city and threaten the completion. In fact, it is super difficult to prevent. The only tile with which my opponent can prevent the completion of a city is the right-handed dagger, which also happens to be the exact tile they have in hand. So that's not great. But at the very least, I get to try something else. I go over here with the idea of blocking or severely restricting that square, making it so that at the very least, my side of the city has 7 points and their side of the city has only 1, and if they never get connected, then an advantage in this mini battle could increase my winning chances. They decide to prevent that by still leaving 2 tiles that fit into that square, but 2 is already less than 4. I get to start a new road, and this is where I decide to spend my last meeple. Well, the reason for that is that there's still plenty of road ends. There are 4 crossroads and a horse and 2 monasteries, and there's still plenty of city caps. There's also a Dorito, which I can get here, so there's still plenty of ways for me to get a meeple back soon enough. It was also quite important to do because they would have used the crossroads to score there, and now they're making it very smart, so they're scoring 2 points there. They're also pre-building a 3-point road, which only they can use because I don't have meeples. And they're also leaving a monastery spot, which only they can benefit from. I get to finish my city and get a meeple back. They decide to add a straight line to my field and facilitate the connection of their farmer with mine. And I get the last remaining Dorito, which I absolutely snap over here. It's important to not only get myself a meeple back, but also to prevent my opponent from drawing a splitter tile and scoring too many points. I'm still minus 11 on the scoreboard, and the fact that red draws a monastery absolutely does not help. It is a lovely spot for 6 points, then it's quite easy for them to score 3 points more here with one of the 6 remaining curves, and then even maybe draw 1 more monastery and even complete it. So I need to play aggressively here, which is why I decide to not only continue my road, but also drop a farmer. And it is an annoying farmer to deal with because the field is of course quite valuable, with at the very least 12 points for 4 completed cities. There's going to be 1 more completed cities if red has their way with the cow tile. And it's also quite closed. After I complete the invasion, which is also very difficult to block for my opponents, it's something that I actually had to think about before dropping this farmer, then it is quite difficult for my opponents to find a tile or a platform to reinvade. But they do. With this tile, I thought that they would do this and just score 2 points for the road, trying to develop their ruin. But they found a far, far better move. They dropped a farmer. That's a lovely find for my opponent. And now they're planning to connect over here through the starting tile through my monastery. And this move definitely benefits them. If I get the starting tile, then I'm likely to go over here and score 6 points for the road and free up my monastery, in which case I would be letting the farmer into the field. But if they get the starting tile, I mean, of course they're going to do this. They're going to take the 6 points for the same road, and they are going to give me my monastery meeple back because the field entrance is so much more valuable. Now I have a tricky tile to play with because I don't have many meeples. In fact, I have only 1. So I can't really start a new city over here as much as I would have liked. The reason for that is that it's too easily blockable. With all 3 horizontal splitter tiles already on the board, red can just get 1 more Dorito maybe, go over here and tie my hypothetical meeple to their blocked meeple, and this would just lose the game on the spot. But here I found a way to extract value from this tile. Maybe try and pause the video and see what you would have done. So I go on the left, and try blocking my monastery. It's also important to orientate this tile the exact way as it was, because it leaves only 3 tiles that fit into the square. And also, after red scores 3 points for this road, it will expose a platform for me to get one of the many road tiles that go here and block the square completely. My opponent just continues the city. There's also a reason why they don't want to start a new city like this. Yeah, because let's say if they turn it downwards, then I can get a cow tile and tie them to this block square. And if they turn it upwards, then you just saw I can also tie them to this blocked square. So basically, both of us will be waiting until we can draw an extender or a city cap. And until that happens, then this guy will be up for grabs here. I decide to complete the field connection. I don't want to be taking these 3 points for a variety of reasons. Well, first of all, I said earlier that this farmer is difficult to block, but it's actually not like that difficult to block. It's not impossible to block. I don't really want to delay this connection for too long. Second, if I score the 3 points myself, then my opponent can go over here and defend the square and still complete the monastery. So probably what I have to do is actually have to wait until they score the 3 points and then go over here so that I can block their monastery. They now try and obstruct my road a little bit, and I don't really have a use for this monastery. It's absolutely not okay to use the last meeple here because I need the meeple for so many things. I need the meeple for the city cap. I need the meeple for this tile in case if I draw it. There are some situations where I might actually have to go over here and score the 3 points myself. So instead I just make a move, which makes my road a little bit safer. I plan to get a curve and turn this to the right eventually if I get one of the many remaining curves. And if that happens, this move protects this square and makes it much more difficult for my opponent to block. They get a monastery tile with not a great monastery spot available, so they just score 3 points for a road, which is about the best that they can do. I decide to finish my road with this particular orientation so that it does not allow any sneaky farm invasion ideas through the outside of a curve. They complete the field connection. I get the first crack at the city cap, but with the quadruple city, they made it so much harder for me to complete. At first, I was disappointed to see this move, but then I had a look at the pool of unseen tiles and look at how many city caps there are. And then I noticed that if I just do something like this, well, then I can create a real threat of completing my city. They get a scoring tile, and they decide to take 2 points for the road, also adding a point to the monastery, and also making it a bit easier for me to block the monastery, but since they already have the meeple advantage, losing a meeple is not a big deal. Now it's also an important decision here. I could go over here and block my monastery, but it would be a mistake. I am 11 points behind, and I need to create some more threats in this position. So I decide to go over here. The reason why it is so much more important than the block is because that even if my opponent were to get a tile that fits into the square, in fact, even if it were to get anything that fits there, of course they're not even going to bother. They're going to try to either invade my city, as they do now, or they're going to try and block my city with some sort of road tile. But then if they have a road tile, it's actually a fantastic situation for me because they can't invade, and regardless of which road tile they draw, and regardless of how they turn it, I actually have loads of city caps that can allow me to complete the city and surge on the scoreboard. So they do get a city cap, they invade successfully, and then I get to do this. It's also an important move. First of all, because there's still 2 Doritos with the road available, and there are no Doritos with the field. So actually, I make sure that they can't invade the city unless they draw one of the 2 cow tiles, which they already need to invade the city over here. Moreover, this defense move gives me a chance to draw the splitter tile and go over here, finish my city for a boatload of points, which I think is 18, no, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16, and then leave them with only 4 points, and this should be enough to get myself quite an advantage. But my opponent is the first to get the starting tile, and they get themselves the 6 points for the road, they get themselves the farmer invasion, but they give me a monastery meeple back, which I can put to good use. Here, I decided to invade the field. I could have blocked the monastery, of course, but it is not the priority. With only 13 tiles remaining, meeple counts are really not that important, and there are multiple places where they could recover meeples anyway. And this field invasion is something that I need real bad if I want to try and win, because I'm 8 points behind on the scoreboard. They have a monastery, whereas I don't have a monastery. I am, of course, ahead in these battles here, but they could still draw both cows and successfully invade. This invasion of the farm is also actually super safe. There are 6 tiles that are remaining to fit into this square, and there are no crossroads available to block. But my opponent gets a scoring tile, which is really not that great for me, because after scoring, it gives them some chances to win this game even if they lose the field. I get the 1 tile which I can't use productively, but at least I get to finally block their monastery. Not that it was super important or anything, but it's certainly something that is better than nothing. They get a curve, so they try to block my field invasion, which of course is not possible given how many tiles I have available, and now I complete the invasion and I face a difficult decision. Do you just leave this alone? Or do you meeple something? Do you meeple the city? Or do you meeple the road? Maybe pause the video right here and try to figure out what the correct decision here is. It's a bit of a dilemma, because normally, of course, you don't want to meeple anything, but if I don't meeple this road, my opponent still has 4 tiles available to them, which is a lot with 10 tiles remaining, that go over here and give them a 5-point road for free. And even though I have the majority on this field, which is now worth 12 points, which is lovely, my opponent has already 14 points advantage on the scoreboard, so my field is not even enough to compensate for this. So if they take this 5-point road, then I don't really have any winning ideas anymore other than drawing the splitter, of course. So I decided to meeple the road. Normally, it would not have been a really great move because roads can be easily blocked. But I've noticed that there's not a single tile in the entire tile pool that helps them block the road. So let's say if they get this city cap, they will go over here, score net 1 points, they will score 4 points for themselves, but they also will give me 3 field points. If that happens, I still have these curves available. The worst tile that they could draw is a splitter. Then they go over here, score 4 points or net 1 point, whatever you want to put it. But even in the worst case scenario, which is also quite unlikely, I still have 1 tile to get myself a meeple back. And of course, they could just draw one of the curves, which does not have a good use for them. Then I can draw another curve on my next turn and get my 5-point meeple back. Also note that with this tile, with the cow tile that they drew, they can't go over here for the sake of blocking my road, because they have to complete this connection, because from their perspective, I'm threatening a splitter tile, and they cannot allow me an easy 16-point city. I get one of the curvy tiles, and I get to finish a 5-point road and keep myself still within range. In fact, if I remember correctly, I am even a bit ahead here. Or no, I'm not. I'm still behind. But there are these lovely city tiles lying around in my field, and a couple of city caps available, which could help me grow my field. If I'm not mistaken, at this point I'm -2. You can recount the points if you wish, but I think it's correct. So they meeple a city, and they score net 1 point, so they get 4 points for the city, I get 3 points for the field. Then I get another city cap, I get to score 7 points, I get to score 4 points for the city and 3 points for the field. And now in this position, if I remember correctly, I'm at +4. Because I have the majority on the field, and the field is now worth actually quite a lot. It's worth 18 points, and it does not really have many invasion options. But since my opponent is only losing by 4 points, there are some ways how they can even try and win without the field, and it's a very difficult decision for them. So why don't you try and pause the video and let me know in the comments what would you play here as red. So red could choose one of the two winning routes. First is the field, one, just scoring 2 points, which brings them a little bit closer on the scoreboard, and then they can hope to get the last cow tile that goes over here, and that allows them to score, well, you could say 6 points, because they would be unifying their 1-point city with my 7-point city, but it's in reality 3 points, because they would also giving me 3 points for the farm by completing that city. But still, so these 2 points over here for the road, plus the 3-pointer here, sort of puts them over the edge just a little bit. And then probably after the analysis that I made of this game, this is the move that I would have made for red. But it's really a tricky decision, because if they go over here, well, then they're still behind 2 points. We're equal on meeple, and they just have to hope for this one tile. So instead, they made a different move. They try to go for the field, and there's still multiple ways how they could go for the field. So they could do something like this and drop a farmer, and then they can hope for one of the 3 remaining curves to connect. That's actually a very high prop connection. The issue with that is that I have, first of all, 2 tiles with which I can go. What can I do? Yeah, I can go over here, for example, and drop a farmer like this. And imagine if they get a curve to ultimately connect to the field, then I get a straight line. Then I reclaim leadership in the field, and I'm still 4 points ahead. And the maximum that my opponent can score is 3 by connecting these cities. And so then I'm guaranteed myself the victory by 1 point. So red didn't want to do that. So instead, they dropped a farmer in a different place, which is a very strong move, because it gives this farmer multiple access routes. They can either draw the starting tile over here, or they can draw one of the many curves over here. But then this does not mean that they win automatically. I could still get something like a straight line, go over here, meeple this farm like this, and then get one of the 3 curvy tiles that connect me over here. So then we both connect to the field. Again, I'm with the majority, and I have still 4 points on the scoreboard. And I still have a 4-point lead, and the best that they can do is score 3 points by going over here. Well, maybe 4 points if they like get a city tile over here, but a tie is not good enough for them because they were the starting player, so a tie is a win for yellow in this instance. But they went for this farmer, which makes a lot of sense. I now don't get a tile to reinvade. I get to go over here, which blocks most of his invasion opportunities. There are no tile that fit into the square. There's still this starting tile. And I can now win in one of 3 ways. I can either just draw the starting tile outright, in which case they don't have any more farming routes. Although it needs to be pointed out that this farmer on its own is scoring 3 points for this completed city, but this still puts them at -1. And I still have a meeple with which I can play and score points. There's another route. If I draw the triple city tile, then I get to go over here, drop a farmer. So then, if they get the starting tile that they need to connect, then they would be automatically bringing in not only their farmer, but also my farmer for a majority of yellow in an even greater field. So that's why, with their next tile, they make a very, very smart move to prevent exactly that. Now, I do happen to draw the starting tile, at which point the game is decided, but I just wanted to point out that there was a third way how I could win. This is simply by getting myself a straight line, like this, and a curvy tile like this. So use the other invasion platform. Well, I happen to do it the easy way by drawing the tile that my opponent needs, and then I just score 4 points, and my opponent really cannot do much except unifying the 2 cities. and getting themselves the 3 points that way. But as a result of this 5-point road, I managed to win this game with a 4-point difference. This is by far my favorite game of the entire tournament against a very strong player. Also happens to be a comeback where I was in a difficult position, just managed to invade the field and keep the majority, win by a couple of points. But also because I felt like it was a high-level game from both sides. From yellow, I wouldn't take a single move back. From red, maybe they win more often if they just delay the farmer and take the 2 points first. And then they sort of wait a little bit to see which tiles happen and then try to postpone the invasion later. But this move for sure is more than reasonable with so many access to the field. It just happened to not work out in this particular instance. In any case, I happened to get 2 victories in 2 games in this convoluted double elimination system, as you can see, and as a result, I don't even have to play the 3rd game, whereas Szigfrid is going to play a 3rd game against another master, the Czech player Pavel Hudec with the screen name Poissy. So I get to wait a little bit and already prepare for my semifinals, which is the topic of the next video. So first of all, do let me know in the comments if you have any questions or ideas about something that I've missed. I've tried to skip some moves and make this video not as long, although I believe it must have been over 2 hours at the very least. Any sort of feedback is appreciated. In case you're new here, then make sure to subscribe for more competitive Carcassonne content like this. And meeple the like button for the algorithm, that also helps. The 3rd part of the video is in the works, where we're going to cover the semifinals and finals. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you soon.